Hello, I'm Charlotte. You are watching The Ugly Atheist. Today's episode is going to delve into sort of a philosophical construct in the religious realm, and that is pertaining to the idea of apologetics. If you don't know what apologetics is, let me define that for you. According to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, apologetics is the branch of theology that is concerned with defending or providing the truth of Christian doctrines. That is the first definition, although I think it's not solely relegated to Christianity. I think there are Muslim apologetics, and when I lived in Utah, I came across Mormon apologists. The second definition is formal argumentation in defense of something such as a position or system. Third definition, the branch of theology which defends the Holy Scriptures and sets forth the evidence of their divine authority. So I think you get the point. So there's obviously some problems that are inherent in apologetics, but I think there's also some good aspects to it, and I will try to discuss both in this episode. So we have the idea of apologetics is essentially, if I would to rephrase the definition, is to defend the indefensible. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing. I think that it's bad in the sense that if you're studying apologetics, you are being taught to essentially lie. There's a position that is actually the false position, and you are having to make use of rhetorical fallacies, logical fallacies in clever ways that aren't readily apparent to the listener, so as to circumvent direct criticism of your position and paint it as if it's actually the truth of the matter. There are a lot of really polished apologists out there, people like Dinesh D'Souza, I believe. I think he's well-intentioned for the most part. I like him. He seems like a very honest guy, but he is caught up in this whole idea of defending the indefensible and trying to uphold lies as if they were not lies. But he does do a lot of service in the political realm, I think, like his documentary on, I think it was called 2,000 Mules or something, that kind of exposed some of the corruption going on with our ballot system. I think that's great that he's doing that. But when he gets into religion, to defend something that's essentially a fairy tale using rhetorical devices and logical fallacies, I think you're just delving into foolishness at that point. And I think apologetics, if you teach apologetics to your children or to your congregation or to any religious group, it's what I think is the good side of apologetics, or that it serves one good purpose, is that it teaches you to think outside the box. It teaches you to find a positive angle in a otherwise negative data set that is normally against your position, but to argue against immense evidence against your position takes a lot of skill, to be honest. It takes a lot of thinking, a lot of mental gymnastics to accomplish that, which I think is, if you're going to go into the field of law or public relations, these are excellent skills to have, to be able to find, a positive angle for your client. I know a lot of people think lawyers who defend the guilty are sort of corrupt and wicked. That may very well be the case, but you can at least say that they have to have a degree of intelligence to be able to do that. So I think it's a good teaching tool for teaching critical thinking and outside the box thinking, because we need more outside the box thinkers. So in that sense, it's good. But of course, in the sense that you are literally learning how to lie in a polished, convincing way, you know, it depends how you regard the value of truth. If truth is important to you, then teaching somebody to lie cleverly is going to be against your moral fabric. You're gonna recoil at that notion. But I know we went over one of the commandments that says don't give false testimony. So that's only pertaining to a court of law setting, and it doesn't actually say don't lie. So maybe Christians are okay with lying in certain circumstances. Maybe Christians are okay with white lies. I know when I was a Christian, I wasn't. I interpreted that commandment to mean don't be dishonest at all, But yeah, I guess if Christians are teaching apologetics to their congregations and their groups and Bible studies, then they're teaching what maybe they perceive as a white lie. Because I think Christianity in particular brings a lot of positive things into the world. And, I've never, when I was living in Utah, for example, to go back to that, I never came across a Mormon who wasn't just the nicest person you'd ever meet. So I think it serves a purpose in society, and it shouldn't be downplayed or eradicated. I think we need religious-minded people. It just becomes problematic when they begin to enact those religious beliefs into law for everybody. If it's your religious belief, that's great. May it dictate your life and your decisions, but you can't force other people to follow your same moral standards. To give you a personal example of going into apologetics, well, first of all, let me say that I used to be an evangelical Christian for about maybe almost a decade, and it was actually apologetics that led me to realize that that the Bible is just fairy tales. The more I delved into it and tried to do an honest approach to argumentation, I had the mindset like, well, if the truth is on my side, I shouldn't have to use logical fallacies. I should just plainly say, like, well, these are the facts. This is the reality of it. Take it or leave it. But what I found, all of the resources I was reading and trying to get to the bottom of an issue, they all used logical fallacies. And I couldn't find any that were supporting the truth of the Bible. And it suddenly just hit me. It just became apparent that the Bible is not to be taken literally. So to give you an example of how apologetics can be a bad thing, I had a friend many years ago who was an evangelical Christian, and he knew I was an atheist, so he was going to give a speech to a youth group of some kind, and he wanted to discuss with his group the idea of evolution by natural selection, and how that is fake and how the Bible is true. So he ran his speech or sermon by me. He had it all typed out, and immediately I noticed that he had created an inaccurate depiction of what evolution states. He had a number of claims in there saying that this is what evolution teaches, and they were things that evolution actually didn't teach, and that I told him, like, look, I highlighted a bunch of the things, and I spoke with them and said, you have a lot of things in here that are actually not what evolution teaches, but you're saying that evolution does teach them. You're creating a straw man version of evolution by natural selection. And I said, have you heard that term before? Do you know what straw manning is? And he said, no. To my surprise, I thought that was something that you learn that in school and college. And so I explained to him straw manning is creating a fake and easily destroyable version of your opponent's position so that your position seems just clearly the right one, even though it's you're knocking down a straw man, of your opponent's position. So it's not the real position. And of course, the opposite of that is steel manning, where you create the strongest version of your opponent's position, and then you knock it down because the truth happens to be on your side. And so I explained that to him, and I said, so you have a choice. Like he had things in there like saying evolution teaches that we evolved by random chance from a rock. And I said, no, evolution doesn't actually teach that at all. In fact, that would be evidence against evolution if we evolved randomly and from a rock. So I gave him a brief lesson on what the evolutionary theory states. And I said, but don't take my word for it. I'm not a scientist, look it up. But the reality here is that you now have a decision. You have a choice to make. I've just told you the truth of the matter regarding the claims of evolution. So your choice is obviously you can either continue with this version of your speech and essentially be lying to your youth group, or you can modify this to accurately reflect your opponent's position and then refute it using your Christian theology, and that would be a more honest approach. And I told him, I take you to be an honest man, so I imagine you will do the right thing. But that was just my 2 cents regarding your speech, and do with it as you will, as your conscience sees fit. I didn't follow up with them, but I'm pretty sure that he went ahead with his original version and taught his kids about the inaccurate version of evolution by natural selection. So these kids are, for lack of a better word, they're the victims of this, because they have an inaccurate version of a theory that has mountains of evidence for its being true and accurate. And they're going to be carrying that with them and spreading that misinformation, so that these kids have a false hope that their position is true when it's not. So I think that's a disservice to the kids, and it paints my friend as someone who is not entirely honest. And honesty is something we all strive for. So I try to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And I think all of us should probably strive to do that as well. At least that seems like a good thing to strive towards. So if somebody told me and showed me evidence that one of my beliefs was inaccurate or just flat out wrong, then I would like to think that I would weigh that evidence and change my views accordingly, if it's sufficiently convincing. And I think just trying to be honest in that regard is all we can really try to do. If you are a believer, I think it's great that you have your faith, and I would encourage you to not delve into apologetics if you want to keep your faith. Don't delve into apologetics because it's going to make you become or lean towards dishonesty. And if you value being a good believer and you value honesty, apologetics is not going to serve you well. So that is my rant for today. So now is the part of the show where we talk about what I learned this week. Today's what I learned this week is not so much something I learned. This is something I've known for many years, and this is regarding narcissism. I grew up in I spent probably the first 35 years of my life from birth to about my mid-30s just living with and dealing with narcissists. I've learned different techniques on how to navigate that, but what it has, one of the many detriments that it has caused in my life is that I grew up not really exploring or knowing who I was, because as you know, living with a narcissist, some of you would know, or one of you, I don't know, whoever's watching this might know what it's like living with a narcissist. You know that you aren't really permitted to have your own opinions or your own preferences or your own habits or ways of doing things. All of that is criticized, and you're told that it's not good because it's not like theirs, and that theirs is better, their opinions are better, their habits are better, everything is better. And so a child going through that kind of environment, you start to, in order to escape criticism, you would align your own preferences and likes with that of the abuser so that you can avoid the stress of argumentation or argumentativeness. You just try to keep the peace by agreeing with everything that they say. But as a result, as a child, you sort of lose yourself, you lose your identity, and you don't really develop one or grow with one. And then after that, I married into, I was in a relationship, I think it was like a 10-year marriage with a narcissist who also had borderline personality disorder. Fortunately, I started to get the help I needed, and I was able to leave that relationship and end that cycle. But what I heard today, there's a YouTuber that I watch, Dr. Ramani. I've watched her for a few years now, and she's very insightful, and she kind of helps. I learned a lot of healing techniques and therapy over the years, but Dr. Ramani's channel is great because it helps to reinforce and remind me of some of the tools I've amassed, accumulated over the years of therapy. And one of the things that she talked about in a recent episode, I think it was episode from yesterday or today, I don't know, but she was talking about the idea of death by 1,000 cuts, which is, for those that don't know, it's when you're living with a narcissist and they just give you little verbal jabs constantly, undermining everything that you do, criticizing everything that you do. Nothing you do is correct, and you have to do it their way. They don't let you do certain things because you do it wrong. And so it just drains your joy in life and your emotion, your soul, and anything that you like about your own personality. Like, hey, I kind of like that I do things this way. Like, that gets eroded. So you're left essentially just this pulp of a former human being who just is horrible self-esteem, horrible sense of self-worth. What Dr. Ramani was saying is kind of an antidote to that is to do healing by 1,000 little acts of self-preservation. I guess she didn't use the phrase self-preservation, but I think I would use that. Self-preservation, or little acts of rebellion, perhaps, where you, even though your narcissistic person in your life is saying that you're doing things wrong and everything you do is wrong, just behind their back and on your own when you're alone, just do it your way anyway. or give yourself little treats throughout the day or the week where, maybe on your way home from work, stop by your favorite coffee place and just spend some time alone having a coffee or meeting with a friend. I know one thing that helped me tremendously is just interacting with other people who are not narcissists, being in relationships with non-narcissists, really helped to clarify things that, for me, that I wasn't as horrible, ugly, or worthless as my narcissists in my life would lead me to believe, and that I wasn't, the sole problem of the relationship as I was led to believe. I think that's wonderful, and it's a step towards healing. But I think the best way to start true healing is to remove yourself from that situation, remove yourself from the narcissist's presence. Just surround yourself with people who like you, who are friendly, and who are not narcissists. I know everybody has their own personality issues and their own emotional issues, but for the most part, I think most people are decent to be around, and I think most people are fairly well adjusted. So just surround yourself with friends like that, especially if it's your family who are toxic to you. And you kind of, sometimes you don't really realize what's going on with a narcissist. You just know that at the end of an extended amount of time with them, you feel emotionally drained. You're like, why do I feel like garbage? Why do I just feel like I have no desire to do anything? I feel like not even trying. So that's the toxicity of it. But there is another aspect that I do want to touch on. I know a few episodes ago, and I think this was an episode I have on Rumble for those of you watching on YouTube, I talked about the power of dopamine and how firm of a grip, how thorough a grasp it has of our decision making and our personalities, like almost every aspect of our ability to interact with people and with our thought life and our desires, is all controlled by dopamine and other neurotransmitters. I'm bringing that up to say that narcissists are slaves to dopamine just like all of us, and that's what is creating their personality disorders and these personality flaws. That is to say that it's not really, you can't fairly fault them for being narcissists. And that sounds ridiculous to say. Of course you can fault somebody for being a narcissist. You can fault them for their behaviors. And I think that's true, but if you understand that dopamine is behind it all, like it's really outside of their control. It's hard to fault somebody for something that's outside of their control. So that the best thing that you can do if you're in a narcissistic relationship is to just leave that relationship or severely limit the amount of time you spend with that person. And I know I was able to get out of my marriage. I ended that because it was for my own health's sake, for my own well-being, mental, physical. I think if I had stayed in that marriage, I'd probably be dead right now. That's not a far-fetched assertion. And the narcissists that are in my life now, I am fortunately able to limit my time with them. Yeah, this is kind of a touchy subject to talk about since it is so personal. But hopefully in talking about it, it can help some people identify if they are in a narcissistic relationship. And I can probably talk more about this later. And I guess also keep in mind that narcissism is a spectrum. There's different grades of it. Some people are narcissists, but they're just on the more mild end of the spectrum, and some are full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. I could talk about this for a fairly long time, so I'll end it there. And you are watching The Ugly Atheist. I am Charlotte, and if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. That would be great. We'll see you next week.